Welcome to Lean Body Mind. My name is Steve and this is my channel where I cover all kinds of different topics. They have a common theme though, and that tends to be just getting more out of life. Getting more happiness, getting more productivity, more efficiency, more sustainability, all that sort of stuff. And today I'm going to talk about gardening. Likely I will have a number of different gardening videos over the course of this channel's lifespan. This one is the first one. This is where I show kind of how I get started every year. Well, not every year, because traditionally I start my own seeds down in my basement. I've got a little room off of the storage room where it's sort of a grow room. I've got a heating mat, I've got the plant lights, but my basement has largely been co-opted by my grandson. So I don't think I could even get to the area where I would be having the grow lights just because there's so much in the way of toys. There's actually, I think, a racetrack on the floor right in front of it. So that combined with just a general sort of lack of ambition, in the February, March timeframe, I decided instead I would just buy plants this year. Now, before I get going too much further in this video, a comment that I kind of feel I need to make about gardening. Gardening and gardeners are kind of like barbecue and people that cook barbecue, pitmasters, I guess, or keto people, or even lean people, the whole continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma group of people. It seems like in all of those areas, and I'm sure other areas in life, there are a lot of people that think their way is the one true way and that everybody else is just doing it wrong. I'm not one of those people. I'm proud to say that I don't know everything. In fact, I'm happy that I don't know everything because that means there's always something for me to learn. Something new about gardening or barbecue or whatever. I will say that I have honed these methods that I use over the past decade or more, and I find they work well for me. If you have any suggestions or things that you do that you think I could do that might improve things for me, I'd be happy to hear about it. Let me know down in the comments below. Before I start talking about the start of the season, I kind of got to talk about the end of the season a little bit because the end of the season can come rather abruptly here in Wisconsin. We go from harvest to frost pretty rapidly. I mean, last year we had snow in October. It's ridiculous. So usually what happens about that time is I don't feel like being out in the garden, ripping out garden, when it's 40 degrees out and windy and just nasty. So as a result, once we hit the beginning of the season, my garden looks horrible. It really, really looks awful. It sort of looks like a wasteland. And also because of where I can plant my garden, I don't have a lot of opportunity to sort of crop rotate. So the plants that I tend to grow in the same spot every year, which is not a good thing because certain plants want certain nutrients and I tend to then wipe those nutrients out of the soil in that particular spot. So I start with the pitchfork, just sort of digging up my future growing, what do you call them, rows? Yeah, I'm gonna call them rows, my future growing rows. And then I start moving some compost into those rows. I've got a compost tumbler back there, you can probably see it. And if I need to buy some extra composted manure, which usually I do, I'll get some of that and I'll throw that down. Then I'll hit it with a rototiller just to get it really mixed in, get that soil broken up nice. There's some people that argue against that. I don't know if there's like a body of evidence that says rototilling is good or bad or what, but that's what I do. Just makes my soil a little bit easier to work. Now, while I'm going through this part of the gardening process, which is absolutely my least favorite part of the gardening process, this is the part where every year I tell my wife, remind me next year that I don't want to garden anymore. What I've found that helps me out and keeps my mood up is I get herbs planted. So long as I'm planting something and I see the fruit of my labor, it keeps me going. So I'll get some herbs going, like I've got some thyme and curry here. And when I put those two plants together, I mentioned this on my Instagram feed, I had music from Rocky Horror Picture Show going through my brain. And I couldn't figure out why that was. I kept thinking about the time warp. And yes, it's time. So you could say time warp. But also thyme and curry. The lead actor in Rocky Horror Picture Show is Tim Curry. So somehow subliminally that just happened. Total aside. One of the things that I found I really like is this 4-tiered herb planter. So I'll have like sage, tarragon, mint, parsley, both Italian flat leaf and curled. What else do I have in there? Oregano, marjoram. I think that's what I've got in it this year. I've got other herbs in different planters, but I really like this because it's more of the cooking herbs that I find I use most frequently, and they're right outside my patio door. So when I'm cooking, if I need fresh herbs, they are just seconds away. Oh, and I'll include a link to that planter down in the description below because I've had people see it in other videos and ask about it. It's really pretty slick. I like it a lot. So after rototilling my garden, one of the things that I noticed is my little picket fence that hopefully keeps out some of the little pests, you know, rabbits and such like. That was looking pretty rough. So I had to replace that. And then from there, I start measuring out my soaker hoses. I irrigate directly at the base of the plant. I do not water the leaves. I figured, you know, A, that avoids evaporation. B, it avoids some of the diseases that you can potentially get when water is left on the leaves. And there's probably some other good reasons, but mostly it just keeps the garden looking nice and clean. I measure out my soaker hoses, and then I lay down weed tarp on the entire garden. I hate weeding. And this is one more way to kind of minimize the amount of work that a garden takes. So I lay down the weed tarp. Then I lay down this red reflective mulch is what it's called. It's really just, it's like a red plastic wrap of sorts. And supposedly what it does is as the sunlight hits it, it reflects that red light back up at your fruit, and it's supposed to increase yields by 20%, something like that. Now I haven't done any sort of an A-B comparison. I found that it seems to work well, and it's one more thing that has my garden looking very clean, very tidy. I have 4 different watering zones, so each row has got its own, you know, on-off switch. Generally, I'll hit them all at the same time, but sometimes, depending on where we are in the season, if I think something needs a little bit more water, I can turn off the other hoses. Another thing that I do, just because I'm anal retentive and somewhat obsessive about my garden and really into visual management, is I create my own label stakes. So I use a photo printer. I've created a template in Word where I create all of my little labels and I print it out on photo paper. Then I've got a laminator. I laminate them. I put stakes behind them, just tape on some, you know, those little thin, 1-inch wide garden stakes. And that's, I put those up in front of every one of my plants. It looks pretty cool, although they do start to fade by the end of the season. Now, this year, since I bought most of my plants, first off, I space everything out. I lay them out to get a feel for how the positioning is going to be, and do I have the right distances and things like that. I think that would be sort of the equivalent of a minimally viable product if you were talking about lean startup. You try something out to get a feel for it before you actually go into production and start cutting holes into the tarp. Once I get all of my plants in the ground, I've got kind of a dual system for how I grow them. I grow vertically, and yeah, I know most people grow vertically, but I grow really vertically. My tomato plants will get up into that probably 6 to 8 foot range, depending on how aggressively I prune them. So one of the things that I have found is that if I just use a metal stake, and what I do is I buy 1-inch conduit and I painted it green, a lot of it's flaking, but I pound those into the ground next to the plant, and then what I'll do is I will use nylons. I'll go and buy the cheapest nylons I can find at a drugstore and cut little strips of it and use that to tie the plant as it grows up along the stake. The reason I use this instead of twist ties or something more firm is it does allow the plant the ability to move a little bit in the wind, and that's going to help build up its strength. Unfortunately, my plants get so loaded down with fruit that even though there's some pretty strong stalks or stems or whatever you want to call on these, lots of times they will buckle just due to the weight of all the fruit. And it's like a controlled demolition. The plant just drops. So now what I do is I put up tomato cages first, and even though I prune pretty aggressively, I still leave enough branches both to act as a bit of a canopy for the fruit, but also so those branches can get over the rings in the cage and use that to help hold them up. So in addition to the herbs and the main garden, I also have a little strawberry pyramid. This is 3 concentric rings of strawberries that get higher up, hence pyramid, and then there's a fountain or sprinkler right in the middle. Unfortunately, I have not had great strawberry harvests the last couple of years. I think part of it is just not cleaning up the strawberry patch enough in autumn to, basically allow for more growth in the spring, but also I think I really need to amend the soil. I need to get something in there to kind of bring that back to life, because the first few years that I had that strawberry patch, I was getting several quarts a day throughout the month of June. I mean, every day I was making jam, strawberry jam. It was great. This year, not so much. Although Colton loved it. He loved, digging through and finding strawberries. So it was a nice little treat for him. But that's really it for this video, which I just wanted to focus on the sort of getting the plants in the ground phase. So the early phase 1 pre-maintenance phase of gardening. So in the next gardening video, we'll get more into the maintenance. So there is a brief period after getting all my plants in the ground where there's not a whole lot going on, which in a way is kind of nice. But then you start getting into the time that you need to be training certain plants, you need to be pruning plants, watering, fertilizing, all of that stuff. So that will be in the next video. If there's any aspects of the garden that you're especially curious about, let me know down in the comments below. Thanks for watching.